VC is called a smart money. It's not only providing a risk capital, but also networks, but also expertise to startups. And by doing so, it helps to fuel innovation in the country overall. So basically, a VC model mimics the evolution model, which is basically creating a diversity, and then based on the most adaptable models or most adaptable agents selection, and then based on that selection, the scale up or acceleration of those who turn to be the most fittest and adaptable. So basically that model is employed by VC, and by doing so, venture capital actually helps to select the best teams, the best models that are becoming the true disruptors and innovators for the next development phase of any economy. So that's the important contribution that venture capital can provide.
It's called a venture fund. It's coming from the word adventure because it's some kind of an adventurous activity, because you never know whether the startups will really work or will grow enough or no. That's why it's considered as one of the riskiest investment assets in the world. As an asset class, it has been formed around 70s, but the activities of venture investments are going back to 50s or even before that. If you look at some historical projects that have been funded with some rich families, etc. But yeah, I mean, as an asset class, it has been formed around 70s. It has already crashed once in around millennium. So it was called dot-com crash, when all these internet companies and their stocks crashed during like a couple weeks, and it caused around trillions of losses for the overall global economy. But since then, already like more than 20 years passed, and the industry is growing again. The benefits of venture capital are like couple. It's not just money. First, it's money, but it's also like smart money and smartness of the money. Meaning that money comes with advice, comes with network, comes with various assets that the venture capital funds provide. It's all like aimed for growing the startups.
Also, venture capital also can be seen as a way of channeling knowledge to the spots in the economy where it is much more needed and can be absorbed.
VC plays a very significant role in the economy. If you are building a billion-dollar company, the easiest way is to get funded by venture capitalists who take all the risks while building these enormous, big but risky companies, right?
Another aspect of that is also that it's a risk capital. It's basically, it motivates, it encourages those entrepreneurs who are willing to take larger risks, betting on solutions of very complex problems.
The tech ecosystem in Armenia has developed despite a lot of hardships, and it's kind of a phenomenon that in a country that is in so much trouble all around, we have a tech sector that's been consistently growing at least 20% all year over year. We have the largest per capita amount of unicorns and a lot of success cases that is very unusual for such a small country and such small population.
On contrary to the general notion that Armenia is a landlocked country, that Armenia is somewhat non-bankable country, investing in startups, investing in successful startups, in Armenian startups being successful on the world scale, just shows that there are opportunities in Armenia which are world-class.
Since tech entrepreneurship is engaged with solving complex, hard problems, the entrepreneurs from Armenia, given that they are from a small country with a very small size, their mindset is global just from the onset, from just the start of their entrepreneur journey. That global mindset is an advantage. And second, our intensive links with other ecosystems through the diaspora, primarily with the US ecosystem and Western European ecosystems, that's an advantage that we can capitalize on.
General partners of BigStory VC are serial entrepreneurs. Me, Hovhannisyan, David Baghdasaryan and Arto Hovhannisyan have been building our startups for the last 5 years. And we never even dreamed about starting a VC fund. But at some point, one of our investors came to Armenia, saw what's happening here in our tech ecosystem, and also he saw that how we are helping the other Armenian founders who are just starting their businesses with our knowledge, network, and expertise. And he gave the idea to start our own fund, which will be unique in sense of it will be founders or founder type of fund. And we thought it's a great idea and the right timing to start the fund. We announced it and got a lot of interest both from the investors and also startups.
STAN was created in February 2018. Predominantly, we were focusing on science-intensive startups. In early years, we were a little bit flexible and trying to hear overall who is there and trying to do what. But then in time, we started to focus more on those startups that really have new technologies and deep tech solutions and high-tech solutions in them. And that's the type of space we want to work with. And because STAN is managed in a way or facilitated by FAST, we also do other programs that would help create that pipeline of the quality startups. One big challenge that the network had in the beginning was really competitive and investable startups. So there were a lot of startups that would be able to pitch because they were part of different, capacity building programs and accelerators, but they weren't ready for a real market. So I think the network and angels have spent quite some time with startups through STAN and through other programs that we run to help startups come to that point to be able to do an investment pitch.
As to Formula VC and what we are trying to do with Formula VC, Formula VC has a vision of Armenia being at least a regional hub, at most global hub, one of the innovation hubs you will be thinking of when thinking of any kind of project and where to implement it. Like you are now thinking of Silicon Valley, like now we are thinking of Singapore, Hong Kong, or Berlin, etc. So we have a vision that Armenia will become one of these spots. And our mission is to help startups during their growth journey with all the resources we have available, being our network, being our assets, being our knowledge, and whatever we can have that we even don't imagine.
Granatus Ventures is the first venture capital fund in Armenia, established back in 2013. At that time, we spotted a trend of many Armenian IT companies that were doing primarily outsourcing or custom software development to develop their own products and move to the path of truly tech entrepreneurships. There were only a handful of teams that could be called startups at the time, but we came to capitalize on the emerging trend and to provide funding as well as expertise and networks to aspiring entrepreneurs and emerging new companies and startups.
Besides our investment activities, we've done multiple startup programs, incubator, accelerator, and within those we've worked with over 150 startups. The latest one is with SAP, which is a big step for us and a big step for the ecosystem overall. It opens up a chance for B2B startups to enter the global markets with the help of SAP.
The first thing that Armenia needs, not just necessarily from the ecosystem of the tech companies, but in general, is awareness. The world does not know Armenia well enough. So our first task is really to be out there, to become part of the world system and help the world get to know us. The second thing is that we really need, as the ecosystem, is bring in high-class, big VC companies into Armenia. This is part of the discovery of Armenia. It cannot be in one night or an overnight thing, but it can be gradual. But it's important that if one or two big VC names enter Armenia, discover Armenia, a lot of other VCs will follow. And bringing big name VCs into Armenia will help also elevate the VC ecosystem in Armenia itself. It will create much higher value and much higher, much better. It will bring the whole system on a totally different level. And that experience sharing and collaboration will benefit the Armenian ecosystem in general. Another thing that we should continue to do is educational part. Educational part is really critical. And we see a lot of things are being done in the tech ecosystem, creation of RMUT labs and TUMO centers, but there is still a lot more that could be and should be done. And this is the convergence of the tech people with business people. We are seeing, as Angel Investor Club, we're seeing the lack and the need of having more business professionals involved in the startups. And people who need more education, whether it's entrepreneurship, whether it's business, whether it's finance, and combine that with teams who have great ideas, great innovation. Creation of labs. Labs are very important, whether those are wet labs or other types of labs for fostering innovation in Armenia. And that goes back, to what Gituj has been doing by trying to push the government, increase funding for science and scientists in Armenia. I think that will create a whole new bunch of innovation that could transition into the startup ecosystem and then become very successful on the world scale.
We didn't face any obstacles while building our fund. We already had a very high level of trust and confidence in our Armenian tech ecosystem. And just after announcing our fund, we got tens of investors willing to invest into our fund, and also tens of startups who also are willing to get funded by our fund. So it's basically was, I would say, easy to start the fund in Armenia, at least for us, based on our prior experience building CRISP and Podcastle.
Because our VC is focused towards the AI, artificial intelligence, a lot of work required there requires degrees in advanced things like mathematics, physics, statistics. And when these things are not prepared or not educated well in universities, in a fundamental level, it's one of the obstacles.
There is a lot of potential on the ground and fewer funding opportunities, and few funding opportunities in the high risk zone, obviously. So there was definitely an agreement that there is a potential and we need to start investing into the talents earlier on to help them kick off, knowing the risks and the challenges that will help. So that was the gap we were trying to close in terms of providing funding opportunities for aspiring science and technology startups in particular.
First of all, the major problem was the lack of high quality startups. There were just a very few startups, and many of them were addressing very local challenges and problems. That was number one problem for us. If a VC in the US would see like more than 1,000 opportunities per year, we would be lucky to see like 100 opportunities. That's why we employed a strategy of investing not only in companies that originated in Armenia, but also companies that, as a result of our investment, set up their operations in Armenia to carry out what we call core value-add activities in Armenia, and primarily these are R&D activities. So thus we were able, by leveraging our capital, to bring in world-class startups into the country from different ecosystems.
Everyone can go and register a VC fund here in Armenia. It's very straightforward and easy. But from the international investors' perspective, we want to invest into legislations where they are like very familiar with, and the easiest path for any startup or fund is to go and register in Delaware. And we chose that path because basically many of our main investors are outside of Armenia, and they're institutional VCs, and we prefer those legislation where they are familiar with and very experienced with.
In the next few years, we have to work on growing the numbers of investments as far as how many startups get investments, and at the same time, how large the rounds are for angel investors as well. But it's very important also that angel networks and angel investors start investing in earlier stages before startups have traction, because then we can give chances to a lot more entrepreneurs and actually have better outcomes.
I think there will be more funds, there will be larger funds, the capital, the overall pool of capital will increase, but I think the most important that it becomes more diversified in terms of the focus, sectoral focus, vertical focus, the types of the VCs. So this differentiation will be the next trend, and we actually, our second fund is trying to open up that avenue for Armenia by focusing on impact tech, as well as the tech that is addressing the very global problems through science-based startups and basically supporting commercialization of science. So the commercialization of science track of development of startup is basically lacking in Armenia. This is the next challenge for the ecosystem, and I think VCs that will support that will take the most risk, but once it's successful, they will also benefit greatly.
Well, it's hard to predict the future as always, but we see the evolution that this ecosystem is going through. We see that the angel networks are growing and there is more interest from different types of angels. What we will see in the next several years is once some of these companies where angels have invested, once they exit and angels do realize their profits and do realize that this is not just on paper, but this is real hard cash that they've managed to earn as a result of their successful investments, there will be, first of all, there will be many more angels coming into Armenia. Many more international investors will be coming into Armenia.
Our ecosystem is now entering the early stage, meaning that all the projects that are also entering the early stage are more or less investable. And if you look around, you can find, over 10 or more investable projects right now that you would like to put some money in. And yeah, meaning that from that perspective it's enough, but of course it's not enough in terms of growing the ecosystem. So that's why we need to work on this supply side. That's why we need to have enough talent to be involved in the projects and enough talent to be brave enough to spin off from big companies and start their own companies. So of course it's not like that the market is really saturated with all these startups, etc., etc. We have some quantity of quality projects that we are looking from investment perspective, but it's not enough in terms of growing the ecosystem. So we need much more.
Armenian tech ecosystem is booming. If we look back at just 5 years ago, there was just only one company, BigStory, who got venture funding, and just one venture capital firm in Armenia, Granatus Ventures. But now there are like around 20 VC-funded startups and 5+ VC funds in Armenia. And I think just in the next 5 years we will have many unicorns and many large companies here in Armenia. And I think all of this, like in my head, the development of Armenian tech ecosystem is distributed between phases. So phase 1 was when outsourced companies started to build products. Phase 2 was when Armenian products started to be funded by international VCs. Then phase 3 is now when many Armenian VC funds are created. And in phase 4, we will be able to have companies registered in Armenian legislation and funded by the funds who also are registered in Armenia.
While the Armenian ecosystem matured significantly since our first investments, it is incomparable. You'll see a diversity of startups doing really world-class projects and invading kind of very contested markets. But still, the number of very high-quality startups is limited in the country. So therefore, the limitation of VC industry in Armenia is not on the side of the basically capital, but on the side of the startups. But as the ecosystem matures, there are more and more opportunities. And I think, given that Armenia is a small country, we have to leverage our intensive links with other ecosystems so that startups can also tap to other resources, and hence the ability to build partnerships with other ecosystem players is critical for any VC to operate in Armenia, and be Western Europe, US, Asia, or advanced or any other advanced ecosystem.
We are seeing a lot of startups that come in from software development industry. What could happen and should happen, and we hope that it needs to be deliberately pursued by all members of the ecosystem, is going into more deeper science tech, whether they're health tech companies based on biotech, whether they're space tech companies based on certain technologies, but that could happen and should happen. We are seeing that a lot of startups that we have right now, they're software-based, like I said, but we hope to see the engineering-based, hardware-based startups. And for that to flourish, the education is part of it, but also we need to have high-class, world-class labs. On top of that, we also need to have high-tech manufacturing capacity in Armenia. If that is achieved, then we will be able to see many more startups successfully, originating from Armenia.